evening. You've tuned into ET Now Startup Central, the first and only daily show in India dedicated to startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Abina Kapasi, and today we have a special show on Budget 2019, where we will discuss the expectations of startups from this budget. We will put forward everything that the startup world needs, and of course, the likely relief on angel tax. We are joined by three very special guests today on our show. Padmaja Ruparel, the CEO of Indian Angel Network; Ankur Pava, the partner of Ernst & Young India; and K. Ganesh, the founder of Growth Story. So good evening to all of you, and thanks so much for joining in on our very special budget show. A whole host of things that Startup India does want, and of course the very talked about angel tax. So let's understand from each of our experts as to what should be some of the key announcements that could perhaps please Startup Inc. With our experts. And Padmaja, I'm going to go across to you first. You know, at the beginning, the government launched Startup India campaign with a lot of fanfare in 2016. And after announcing it, you know, startups became a more mainstream topic. So what do you think are the key hits and misses of the NDA government?
No, so I think, thank you for having me on the show, and I'm delighted to participate. I think this is the Startup India program announced by this government is exceptional. I think for the first time it brought startups right under the limelight and the focus that it deserved, both for innovation, job creation, as well as wealth and value creation. And I think it's a very important for every country, and ours more than ever, to have the startup ecosystem, because that's the best way to start creating jobs. So that's very important, and I think they have moved quite a bit. I think the government, if I look at Niti Aayog, if I look at the PMO, if I look at DIPP, SEBI, all of them have sort of orchestrated quite a few initiatives which have worked. For example, if you look at ease of doing business, it has made it easy. If we look at Niti Aayog and tinkering labs and all of those, that has sort of innovated and encouraged and inspired people. I think the fund of funds, which is managed by SIDBI, I think it has created many more VC funds and managers and brought a lot more capital into the country for startups. But I think the miss has been only one, which is really playing a very devilish role in the ecosystem, which is, as you said, the angel tax, which is the section 5627B. This is one which is really creating a huge effect or an impact, which is almost negating all the good work that this government has done. This section 56 unfortunately was promulgated with earlier, but the issue is that it is completely creating a situation where there is a flight of capital, flight of talent, flight of wealth and value creation. Exactly the things that the startup ecosystem was doing for the country, it is working in reverse gear. And I do believe that this is something that needs to be addressed very quickly, and I must acknowledge that there has been an engagement by the government to handle this and to engage with industry, to engage with startups, to engage with investors, to ensure that this is handled. But I think in a very succinct way, if I share, I think angel investors are imperative to seed and early stage companies. They are unlocking their wealth and investing in very high risk asset classes. This needs to be encouraged, because this is what startups are going to need all the time if we want the startup ecosystem to grow the way we want it to grow. It is growing, but it's slowing down because of this one issue. Number two, I think what is also very necessary is to have a framework much
Padmaja,
beyond, where startups which are registered with DIPP.
Padmaja, you know what? I'm going to ask you your wish list as
Hello?
well on the budget in just a bit. But this was, of course, just to first understand the hits and misses of this initiative, Startup India, that was launched. I'm going to also go across then to Ganesh and understand his perspective of the Startup India movement. Ganesh, do you think, you know, the initiatives taken by the Modi government have indeed made life easier for startups doing business in India?
Yeah, absolutely. I must compliment and unreservedly acknowledge the initiatives taken by this government, and Padmaja actually listed them out, whether it is the fund of funds, whether it's a Startup India, whether it's a Niti Aayog or DIPP, or even the various grants, support to incubators, Atal Tinkering Labs, all of that has phenomenally helped put startup and the entrepreneur in limelight into the forefront. This angel tax or devil tax, which is a 2012 legacy, is killing all of it, is clouding it. See, when you have a bowl of soup, you require only one drop of poison to poison the entire soup. So, today that is the situation. Unfortunately, this is not an angel tax, this is a devil tax. It is draconian, it is wrong. It should not be tinkered with or corrected. It has to be done away with before any of us are able to at least even stand up and clap and compliment the government for the great work being done. And I am really fail to understand why something like this is still existing. But to be fair, on February 4th, another meeting, consultative meeting has been called with all the stakeholders. I am really happy to see the government reaching out, trying to understand, but just cut it out. It is like a terminal disease, needs to be removed. It cannot be fixed by putting band-aid. Let me just give you just three simple things that really is hurting in this thing. One, this angel tax, even with all the clarifications, requires each and every startup to register to DIPP. It does not matter whether I want the benefit of income tax holiday or not, whether I want some of the benefits they are offering, irrespective of it, I have to register. That is extremely draconian, that I have to register before I even start a small business. Second, it requires every angel investor to have a net worth of 2 crores and an income of 50 lakhs before the investment from him can be exempted from angel tax, which means when my uncle or my mother wants to give me 5 lakhs or 3 of my college friends wants to pool in 5 lakh and give it to me, government will take away 30% of that as tax, which is bizarre. And the third and the most draconian thing vis-a-vis tax is, it taxes any difference between the fair market value. Now, all of us know at early stage, at venture stage, at startup stage, at beginning stage, there is no determination of fair market value. Even the experts, investors disagree with the valuation. How can we ever explain to a tax person or CBDT what is the fair market value? And anything other than fair market value will be known only after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years when startups succeed. For every one startup that succeeds, 10 fails, and the fair market value of 10 of those are completely wrong. And the government wants tax when nobody has made any money. The companies have shut down. This is really making life extremely difficult, negating all the ease of doing business. And I hope in the February 4th meeting, DIPP and tax people actually just cut it out and throw it out of the window, so that we have very positive, constructive talk about
Ganesh,
expectations from the budget.
Right. Ankur, I want to come to you now. You know, Ganesh has really spoken on a lot of things when it comes to angel tax. Do you think that there are global models that India could follow when it comes to dealing with startups and taxation?
No, certainly, Netra. I think Ganesh's views, I completely agree with this. This is really more demonic than anything angelic about it. But I think fundamentally the tax itself, in my view, in India itself is not needed, because we've already got GAR, which is intended to address the same issue of, you know, unjust enrichment. And ultimately, why have another law and paint every transaction in the same brush when you actually have, you know, better means of addressing it, and the law already, you know, provides for it. So I completely agree that, you know, this should be you know, abolished immediately, and there's no relevance of it in once you have GAR. I think on the international models, look, I think I think most countries, and this is clearly very progressive in terms of how the government has talked about Startup India, all the incentives and benefits, and they're very similar benefits a lot of other countries are giving. But I think angels actually are being protected there much more in terms of even giving them incentives, you know, tax breaks on earnings, tax breaks on capital, capital expenditure, and losses adjustments that they're allowing, for all of these things. So I think there's clearly models that the government can adopt from other jurisdictions to really make sure that there is more investments that happen. And I think Padmaja made a very good point also earlier that look, this is a very integral part of entrepreneurship growth in India, because where is the other source of funding that any of these startups have, given the fact that our funding requirements, bank loan, debts are just so difficult to get. I think this is a great way for people to come forward and build businesses, create employment. So rather than sort of support it, I think some of these measures are really not going to help the ecosystem. So I hope come 1st February this goes, and if it doesn't, then the 4th February meeting, there's something more constructive that comes out of it, which is more in line with what international countries are already doing about this.
Padmaja, let's talk about financial technology and the startups that have cropped up in that space. Do you think measures are required in that front? Because eKYC for private firms was done away with the Aadhaar verdict. So can we expect any measures over there?
So, before I go there, I want to just express very clearly something. I think what the government through DIPP is doing is exceptional. But I think clearly what we would look for in the budget is the following. To what both Ganesh and Aman have said, I think Section 56 startups which are raising up to 10 crores, I think they could be exempted from Section 56. I think wherever there are misuse doesn't happen for 10 crores, they happen for hundreds of crores, number one. Number two, I would say that those which are registered with DIPP, which are startups, I think they should be exempted. And I also think that just as we have created a recognition for startups, we should also have a recognition for angel groups. The reason being that those companies which are within the limits, within the definition of startup as defined by DIPP, they will get exempted through DIPP certification or definition. But there are many companies that are raising money which are beyond startups and which are raising money beyond which actually are raising money from angel groups. And today in the startup ecosystem, almost about 60–70% of the money being raised by startups is being raised by angel groups. And these angel groups could provide a much easier way for the government, because today there are about a dozen, 2 dozen angel groups in the country at best. So they could actually provide the government, just like SEBI registered VC funds do, all the information and quarterly updates, etc., that can help the government track. The piece that really hurts, to be honest, and that can be easily solved, is asking for investor details. Angel investment is a very small sliver of the portfolio. So, instead of asking all those details and the investors providing huge amount of details, they just say, listen, I don't want to do this. Let's just step away from angel investment, which is not good. So I think create a system where they take the PAN number of the angel and that's it. They can check everything on the income tax system. So I think these simple tweaks or simple things that can be brought in, I think it will help a lot, both creating transparency about startups as well as the money that they are raising, as well as the angels investors coming in, and create actually a lot of time and energy which is wasted by the government and the departments to not go after these small amounts. They are not going to really create much of an impact in tax collections. The revenue collections are happening in companies which are hundreds of crores. What will this really provide? Just 30–40 crores a year? Not worth it to our minds. So I think there is that piece that we would urge the government and we would look forward to in the budget to see if these can be cleared up. I think single most important thing is honestly the angel tax, because that makes it really what Ganesh said, the devil tax. And secondly, I think what we would like to also see is Section 42 of the Companies Law, because there also companies, look, startups need to pitch to a whole lot of investors and then be able to raise a little bit of money. I don't think Section 42 should be applied to startups, and we can include that also in the definition of either startups as defined by DIPP or those raising money through recognized angel groups, because it's very difficult for startups and they have to pitch to a whole lot of people, and I think this is a little bit making it a big hurdle for startups to raise. to your point, I think
okay,
the
Padmaja, you
opportunity
know what,
that India
actually,
is
so
providing
Padmaja,
today-
basically you've outlined what exactly is it that you would want from the budget essentially. I mean, of course, scrapping of the angel tax and even the section that you mentioned with respect to raising monies. And Ganesh, I'm going to pose that question with respect to financial technology startups to you now. You know, like I said, that e-KYC norm essentially was done away because we had the Aadhaar that came in. So what are the measures we can expect when it comes to financial tech?
No, I think see, both in the financial sector as well as for even other sectors in the area of finance, one of the top things that I think the startups would need help is with working capital. See, government did very laudably come up with this fund of funds where they are distributing, they are giving up to 25% corpus for VC funds, and that helped a lot of VC funds do their first close and go on to raise money. But one of the biggest areas where the startups are suffering today is in the area of working capital. So, some allocation, money, special fund and special support either through the fund of funds scheme dedicated to working capital would be extremely useful. Two is government already has got this Mudra scheme. If it can extend it to cover, make it more comprehensive and also cover working capital requirement of startup, that would go a long way, because banks will not give working capital to startup because they don't have a profit track record, they cannot give collateral, they can't give personal guarantee. So, I think from the point of view of fintech, extending the Mudra scheme to cover that, creating something for working capital and creating lending for startup, whether it's bills discounting, for receivables financing, all of that I think has been neglected. The other area of grants like DST, for example, has got a seed fund scheme through the incubators they give, extremely effective, extremely well done, great job done by government. DST has got research grants, again extremely useful, being implemented through incubators. I think both of it helps a lot. Similar thing on working capital, lending, financing for startup would be extremely useful. The second area is this entire CSR scheme. Today, under the for eligible CSR spends of profit making corporates that make profit, they can
Ganesh,
invest
I just
in
want to
incubators.
actually know about for financial
it a bit.
technology. I'll come to you as well on what are you hoping when it comes to the budget. Ankur, I want to talk to you about disbursement. Now, we understand that when it comes to that whole funds of funds announcement, again, generated with much fanfare, but disbursements have been poor. So, how would you read into that, Ankur?
No, so I think while yes, the allocations were announced, the amount of investments that have happened in the last 2 years is clearly sub 10% of the fund. I think there are a lot of obviously execution issues with regards to that, investments into AFIs and then downstream investments that the funds are ultimately doing, and that obviously has a time frame itself. So I think the allocation, the way it's working right now, it takes a much longer time to be able to finally get funds in the hands of the startup companies. I think to Ganesh's point as well, I think some of this should then move into sort of venture debt, working capital kind of investment, and that the government should find a mechanism to sort of fund directly. Because some of those are some of the immediate tweaks that are needed, because the time that it's taking for a deal to finally consummate into capital going down into the hands of the startups is just too long, given the procedure that is being followed, and rightly so. I mean, there is a process of investment that every fund or investment team is going to run with. But I think as an answer to that, there is clearly a need for more to be done, especially if we can find innovative ways of using this fund of funds to work through debt structures, working capital, short-term financing, non-collateral based borrowings, which is really what's needed by all these startups where there is no collateral, there is very little capital available to fund long-standing working capital that is required for them to build and grow the business. Clearly keeping in mind that there is going to be a fair amount of burn that you'd anticipate in these businesses early enough. So the capital has to come from somewhere, and I think some sort of venture debt within the fund of funds is probably a good way to go for the government.
interesting proposals essentially to improve the disbursement numbers. Ganesh, I want to talk to you about the ease of doing business ranking. Yeah, we did notch up a couple of points, you know, from 156 in 2017 to 137 in 2018. But it's still not a number that one can boast of very proudly. So what do you think is holding us back there?
No, I think we still have huge number of compliances, huge number of forms to be filled, returns to be done. We just don't seem to be getting away from there. See, while I laud the government and compliment the government for a lot of work they are doing to promote entrepreneurship, but what is fundamentally required is, can I just start a business? I think this was mentioned by Padma earlier. Till the time I reach certain size, say for the first 2 years, till the time I hit 10 crore of revenue, can I just be left alone? I don't have to actually file anything, because 90% of the startup actually fail. They will not be there after 2 years. Now, the amount of effort I am doing to fill the returns, do compliance, pay the lawyers, pay the tax consultant, people like Ankur may disagree, okay, the amount of money I pay E&Y is phenomenal. Why is it required? Should I, as an entrepreneur, focus first on getting my venture off the ground? So, if they can just say, leave the startup entrepreneur alone for the first 2 years, or till he reaches say 20 people in the organization, or till he reaches say 1 crore of revenue, put a de minimis below which nobody will come and question and knock on my doors. Today we go round and round and round and round in circles in order to just fulfill the requirements of government, taxman, Companies Act, all of that stuff, just because I want to start a juice shop, a simple one. That, I think, ease of business is still extremely poor in India, because the government is doing a lot in order to promote entrepreneurship by having fund of funds, by doing other stuff, but at the ground level it is not removing. My simple request, other than just kill this devil tax or angel tax, is that make a de minimis. First 2 year, before 20 people, before 1 crore of turnover, let them be. 9 out of 10 will die anyway. You don't have to get involved in it. Otherwise, taxman, compliance man, lawyer, Companies Act, this notice, each one of it kills the entrepreneurial spirit. That is what is killing us. And it's not going to change unless somebody takes a decisive step. And I'm happy the government is proactive, the government is talking, hope they are listening to it. At early, small levels, leave the entrepreneur alone to fail or fly.
Okay, all right. Padmaja, just one last question very quickly, if I could get in your comment. The interim budget is going to have a lot of leeway, a lot of focus on the agri sector. So, do you think this will give a fillip to startups betting on the Bharat story and agri-focused startups in particular? Very quickly, your comment on that.
No, absolutely. I think to be honest, I think agriculture is the backbone of this country for a very long time, and it still continues. And innovation and technology enablement is necessary, and it is starting to happen. And I think the Bharat story is just starting, honestly. And this Bharat story is going to go global. To Ganesh's point, I would absolutely say the same thing. I think de minimis is important. And I think what the STPI scheme did for the IT industry, it almost harbored and absolutely sheltered it from any of the early issues. We should use the STPI concept and philosophy for the startup ecosystem and actually just not touch it till they really become profitable or go up to 25 crores. I think that is absolutely important if we want the startup ecosystem to go. Look what STPI did to IT industry. It's now touching $200 billion industry, and it's become the face of New India. And I think India has the ability to become the face of the new startup ecosystem in the world. So, agri being just one of them, fintech being another, cyber security being third, manufacturing being fourth, real tech being fifth. I mean, just look at the amount of innovation opportunities we have, the amount of opportunities we have to create startups, and the talent that is already bubbling to do this.
Right.
So, let's encourage it by just cleaning up the mess.
Of course,
and
absolutely.
we've come a long way We just have a little bit more to do.
Right. Actually, I would have loved to squeeze in one more question on the regulatory environment and the recent deals, but I'm afraid with Ankur, but I'm afraid we're completely out of time. So Padmaja, Ganesh, as well as Ankur, really appreciate you giving us your time on this very special edition of Startup Central. Just 4 days left to go, and here it is, Startup Inc.'s hope for the community, for the ever-growing industry, and that is Startup India. So thanks so much for joining in. We hope you enjoyed this edition of the show. News and views continue on the other side.